Your Serene Highness, Honorable Limpos, Excellencies, and honored guests. A warm welcome to this session. You may be wondering what is in common between Amanda Chong, a Singaporean lawyer and an award-winning poet and playwright, and Huma Qureshi, a very famous and award-winning Bollywood actor, as well as OTT star. For one, they both express themselves through their artistic work with an empathetic focus on women, exposing the vulnerabilities and realities, but also creating space for empowerment and hope. They are also social advocates in causes apart from women's rights and are role models for young women in their countries. Amanda's plays like Psycho Bitch, #Women Supporting Women, and the poetry book Professions very ably portrays the challenges of women professionals and women in every aspect. A central theme to her power, as you heard earlier, is gender and power. Talking of gender and power, many of us are familiar with Huma's powerful female roles in Gangs of Wasseypur, Laila, Tarla, Dalal, Maharani, Dear Ishqiya, and there's so much more. It is then perhaps no surprise that Huma's foray into the literary world is through her book Ziba, an accidental superhero. It is a fictional story about a flawed and unwilling heroine discovering her powers. So let's start the Q&A round. Amanda and Huma, you talk and write about strong but also imperfect and vulnerable women, turning the stereotypical notions of feminism of in control and perfect women on its head. Is this a deliberate move on both your parts to redefine feminism in a more realistic sense? Amanda, you first, and then Huma.
Thanks very much for that very, very thoughtful question. And I'm really glad to be here in Bhutan. I've just been here for a day, but it's just such a beautiful and fascinating place. So to your question, my work on representing women's characters actually comes from wanting to push back against the oppressive conditions and the gendered expectations that women face. And by that, I'm referring specifically to the narrow range of acceptable behaviors for women. And my perspective on that really comes from my work as a lawyer. I began my career as a lawyer working as a sex crimes prosecutor for 6.5 years. And during that time, I really experienced this duality of gendered expectations. On one hand, to be a successful prosecutor in court, I had to almost wear this armor of toxic masculinity, to kind of project a certain image of myself in order to make sure that my cases were successfully prosecuted. But on the other hand, the women who had experienced gender violence that I was representing, they had to perform in an entirely different script of gendered expectations, and that was the one of the damsel in distress. And I think all of us are very familiar with the kinds of stereotypes that we have about women who are sexual assault survivors, that, they could have worn more modest clothing, why didn't they scream, why didn't they report this case earlier? And I think what was really impressed upon me in those days in the courtroom was really that in the courtroom, it's not just a contestation of facts, but really a contestation of stereotypes and ideas that we have about gender. And in order to really drill down to a more equal world where abuse of women would be considered unconscionable, we really have to come at it from the perspective of shifting culture. And to me, shifting culture, the levers are not just legal or policy levers, but they really are levers in art and in pop culture. And I think this really segues quite nicely into the work that Huma does as a performer and actor and a creator of pop culture. Because for me, in my own small way as a poet and playwright, that's exactly what I'm trying to do in representing women, is shifting all these ideas and impressions and really representing women in all their multitudes and shades and tones, and not as just caricatures.
Amanda, I've just met a sister. We just met a while back and we shared some butter chai outside. And I'm like, I've just met my sister who, just from another country. And there's so much that we all have in common as women, and we could be from any part of the world. But when you just really get down to it, our stories are so similar. I'm personally, I have always been obsessed with the idea of badly behaved women. I love that. I think, there's so much pressure on women to talk, speak, act, behave a particular way, where often it comes, you know, it just suppresses them and suppresses the full experience of what it is for themselves to be. And I'm obsessed with the idea, both as an actor and now as an author, to talk about real, living, breathing, three-dimensional women in all their glory and all their, I don't know, toxicity or whatever it is. Because to be a woman is not a binary, you know, and I feel like that expression has to seep into popular culture. And we've been actually exchanging some ideas on that. And because I do believe that any kind of social change always has and stems from popular culture. I mean, when I was a kid, I was not watching documentaries or reading like books. I was watching like, I don't know, Backstreet Boys and, you know, I mean, those were my cultural references. And I feel like if we have to sort of present ideas that actually end up making social change, we have to embed them through popular culture. And that's, I think, I'm dedicating my life to doing that and also having a bit of fun.
Thank you for those wonderful answers. Amanda, Psycho Bitch is partly based on your experience. However, the actual play is so much more. And even though you are ethnically a Chinese Singaporean, you chose a Tamil Singaporean actor to play the main role, Anya Samuel. Your play goes into gender, identity, patriarchy, unrequited love, subtle racism, and societal pressures to conform. What Anya faces would even apply to a professional woman in Bhutan. Please explain the name Psycho Bitch and what your play says about the pressures a modern professional woman faces.
Okay. So I think before I explain the name Psycho Bitch, perhaps I should just explain what Psycho Bitch is about. So Psycho Bitch is about this type A overachieving journalist, Anya Samuel, who is engaged to a CEO of a tech company. And he asked her to explain the 4 times she's cried in public in the course of their relationship to prove that she's not an emotional person. But because she is the type of woman who doesn't like to lose an argument and who is always conditioned to be absolutely excellent at everything she does, she prepares this crazy PowerPoint presentation to prove why she's not a psycho bitch. And that includes infographics of her menstrual cycle, as well as animations of her uterus. And a lot of people ask me, oh, this is such a wild idea. How did you come up with it? Fun story, it's based on my story. This really did happen to me. I did date someone who asked me to explain the 4 times I cried in public in the course of a relationship. But I am not an expert at PowerPoint. I'm a litigator, so I prepared 30 pages of legal submissions which were color-coded.
Live away for a breakup. Like, that's an amazing way to break up with a guy. Just send him like a document.
So, I mean, to go to that, the title of Psycho Bitch, or why I decided to call it Psycho Bitch, is because that is the trope that we label women with messy emotions, or women who make their emotional needs known. They are known as psycho bitches. And really the whole play is a dissection of that trope of a woman and an uncovering of that universal story that I think all of us carry, that behind all of this is really this desire to be fully known and fully loved for all our complexities and our tensions, and not to be reduced to any specific label. And to the aspect of your question as to why is it focused around a Tamil Christian woman, it is because at that time, as I was going through that particular breakup, one of my best friends is a Tamil actor in Singapore, and she was also going through a terrible breakup with a Chinese man. And for those who are not familiar with the racial dynamics in Singapore society, Chinese is the majority, and Indians are one of our minority races in Singapore. So there's a whole kind of other degree of like complication and complexities in interracial relationships, and we also wanted to explore that in a play. So the character of Anya Samuel is really 2 women coming together in solidarity to exercise all their breakup demons at once.
Wonderful. Huma, in your movie roles, you keep breaking the mold with different roles. Similarly, your book, Ziba, an accidental superhero, breaks the superhero mold. Please talk about the inspiration behind the main character and the main message of your book to young girls.
Well, in my journey as an actor, I feel like, especially because it's a role that, I have to be in front of the camera and I'm open to everyone's idea of what I should look like or how I should dress or, I'm an actor's, anyone can comment on an actor's life, body, face, whatever. So I've been always obsessed with the idea of like, what is it to be perfect? And as a superhero need to be perfect. And I've often come to realize that not necessarily. In fact, it's the imperfections that make us more interesting. And in my own personal journey as a woman, I think the older I'm getting, the more at ease I'm getting with myself and how I'm looking. I think my 20s, I was a mess. I used to just think I'm just the ugliest person and I don't know how to talk and I don't know how to dress. And I think as you get older, you're just like, there's no ticking bomb. You think in your 20s, like, oh my God, if I don't achieve this by so-and-so deadline, like life is just going to run out. And that's not necessarily true. There's more and enough time. You have to find that space within you. And for me also, the journey of Zeba in this book is also about finding that space within herself. She's the most badly behaved, badass woman you'll ever meet. She was raised a Muslim, but she does everything unholy that is expected from someone who looks like her. She has multiple boyfriends. She smokes pot. Like she doesn't know how to talk politely. So she's not someone who's the conventional superhero. But through her self-discovery of who she is, she comes to terms with herself and the world around her, and it's that interpretation. And I love that idea. I was very scared when I presented a copy of my book to my mother because I didn't know how she was going to respond to it. And she had a very interesting interpretation of it as well. And I think when she sort of accepted it, I also felt very happy about it. And it's a book that came out of all my troubles during COVID. I think I was just at home and I found all the time in the world to write this book and what I was feeling at that point in time.
Thank you so much. Very interesting experience and book as well. Amanda, in your play, #Women Supporting Women, on one hand, there is a Chinese Singaporean, Karina Teng, who is the youngest female partner in a prestigious law firm, and she represents privilege. On the other hand is Sarah Ismail, a Malay Singaporean intern, a former intern, who experienced a toxic workspace and sexual assault in her office. But the conversation eventually exposes the supposed empowerment of Karina in a patriarchal setting. Your play delves into gender and power in the workspace, sexual assault, lack of women's solidarity for each other, race, class, privilege, women as victims, and the hollowness of some women empowerment slogans. In Bhutan, we are finally having a lot of conversation around toxic workplace culture, sexual harassment at the workplace, and if the glass ceiling is really broken. Can you please speak to what your play brings out about a common experience of women in workspaces with a largely patriarchal, male-dominated power dynamics?
Thank you very much for really taking time to understand my play. I think that was the best synopsis I've heard. In Women Supporting Women, I really wanted to explore the intersection of different types of feminisms. And I especially think that between the Gen Z and millennial feminists, we have different conceptions of the way that we would want to approach a situation that we're in where we face inequality. I think what we see is that the Gen Z women are really leading the charge in terms of calling things out very directly. But there will be some who might consider that, propagating cancel culture. And the millennial women, I think, we believe that we can affect change within the systems that we are in. Perhaps we may be outspoken within the systems that we're in, but we still, at least speaking for myself, perhaps, there is that fear of rocking the boat too much. And I think as to women in workplaces, I think the tensions that we experience are really the same all around the world. And I say this with a fair degree of confidence because in writing this play, I interviewed various women, from UK, US, India, and my part of the world as well. And the main thing that we face is this duality, that ultimately the corporate world is a world that is shaped after men, because men have been in it and led it for a very long time. So there are certain male characteristics which are expected of women or are seen as leadership qualities. That is assertiveness, decisiveness. But somehow when these qualities are manifested in a woman, yes, they are seen as good, but at the same time it comes with this negative tinge, which is like, why are you being so dominating? Why are you taking up so much space? And I also had to navigate this in my own career as a sex crimes prosecutor. So in Singapore, the defense bar, so the defense lawyers, they tend to be older men. And in a very, very palpable way, when they speak to my male colleagues, who are also fairly young male prosecutors, they would call them sir. But I have been called girl, darling, basically, basically everything
babe,
but ma'am, and I've also been in situations where I know that they do not want to be contradicted by a young woman. And so things that are usually settled very quickly by a discussion between lawyers where we agree on the law, we agree on the facts, they wouldn't want to agree that I'm right on the law, and so they would insist that it goes into an interlocutory application in front of the judge, because they want the judge to arbitrate between whether me, the young woman, and them, the older respected man, is correct. And so I end up doing so much extra work. But I have to say that in those circumstances, what was really, really important for me was to have older women mentors who would be able to support me through that kind of dynamics. And I'm sure, Huma would also have stories of having to navigate, the duality of expectations that women face.
No, absolutely. And just to add to that, I don't think we talk enough about older women mentoring others. And I feel that's such an important, that sisterhood or those relationships are something I really value in my life. And somehow, I've always had this issue with, whenever entertainment journalists ask me a question, they're like, oh, tell us about a cat fight that you had on that movie set. And I was like, when two men fight, you don't call it a dog fight, do you? But there's always this lens saying to be like, oh, two women never really get along. And I said, actually, the opposite is more true. In fact, I have had better relationship with so many of my female colleagues than with the male star, because I feel we understand each other's experience, issues, and there's always that sense of, friendship. But no, it's never really represented that in that sense, and I feel like more conversations need to be had about that. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, we need to do something about the adjectives that I used. Like sometimes I'll get a script and it says, oh, she's a strong woman. And I'm like, but why do you have to specify that she's a strong woman? What type of woman is not strong? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a conversation that needs to be had and should carry on. Huma, as recently as May 2025, you said that despite the success of the hugely successful Maharani OTT series, you experienced a significant pay gap compared to male stars in the OTT industry. It is very clear that gender influences pay and power in Bollywood and the OTT industry. So how are the women actors there working to change things?
Well, honestly, I'm also a producer now, and more than the female actors changing it, is the systemic change that needs to come from studio heads, executives who work, on these OTT platforms. They need to change their mindset. The female actors, if you give me a bigger paycheck, I'll take it. But it's the systemic understanding that I don't deserve it, and I feel it's very, very unfortunate. But that's just the way things are. Till date, I don't think barring the shows and films that I headline, if I'm doing a film with a bigger star, I don't think I'm paid adequately. But that's unfortunately how things are. And if I or other actresses say something about it, we're just seen as too difficult.
By the way, I watched Huma's latest OTT series, season 3 of Maharani, and I love the twist in the end. I'm not going to spoil it, of course, but please do watch it. Amanda, your poetry book, Professions, is about broken love and is also a feminist critique of romantic relations and power dynamics within it. In the same book, you have a patriotic poem called Lion Heart, written when you were just sweet 16, I would say, and inscribed into the Marina Bay Helix Bridge in Singapore. Yet in the same book, your adult self wrote Notes from a Colonialist 2065. That is a satire on Singaporean nationalism, the survival myth, and consumerism. The same book, I noted, has both acceptance and rebellion within it when it comes to romance and nationalism. Was this friction and the counterpoint deliberate? Before you answer, for the audience, this brilliant book is for sale at the festival, so go get a copy. Please.
Thanks.
Will she autograph it, but?
Gladly. So I think what you pointed out is exactly right. That to me, in any good piece of poetry, you need that consonance and dissonance, right? The art is in the tension of ideas. And I wrote Lionheart when I was 16, and for some reason it then got engraved into the Marina Bay Helix Bridge. So if you come to Singapore, you will see the poem there. And again, something that I did not expect was that it then got added into the Cambridge International GCSE syllabus. And I was 16 when I wrote it, and the other 16-year-olds have to study this poem. And I only realized this when I was getting all of these emails from 16-year-olds asking me for homework help. and of course, on principle, I did not grant it. I feel like 16-year-olds should do their own homework. But in any event, I think to me, I writing Notes from the Colonialists, I felt that the idea of Singapore I portrayed as a 16-year-old was a little bit too simplistic. And I think that we are idealistic, and there's always a place for idealism. But as I grew older, I realized that we need to be able to see our country from different angles. And only then are we able to think about what is the best way forward for a country. So I have often said that Singapore is in a crisis of story. And by that, what I mean is that the narrative that the world knows of Singapore, which is that we've gone from third world to first in a single generation, that is no longer valid for my generation because we grew up in a developed Singapore. But how then, and so now we have a crisis of story, because what is the story of Singapore from now going forward? And I feel that the responsibility for addressing that crisis of story really comes from looking both at our history as well as into the future. And so I want to contribute to that by offering my different perspectives, because I firmly believe that any sort of dissent comes from a place of love. And there's so many different ways to be patriotic. And I think that also extends into my ideas about romantic relationships. As you observed in my poem, in my collection of poems, I do have poems which are simultaneously both about gender power dynamics and about the history of women being excluded from female professions. So the title of my book, Professions, already encapsulates that duality, because it refers to occupations as well as confessions. And the backbone of the book is actually poems written from the perspective of a disgruntled muse about being left out from the work of, like the writer, the physicist, the lawyer. But these poems are also about gender dynamics. And I really believe that what poets are supposed to do is they are supposed to be witnesses to the insides of moments. So my poetry book begins with this epigraph by Zadie Smith. Every moment happens twice, the inside and outside, and there are two different histories. And I can't comment as to the inside of the moment for other people, but I want people to be able to see both the outside of that moment as well as my perspective of the inside of the moment.
Thank you, and this is the first time I've genuinely heard a Singaporean talking about dissent. So congratulations. This is for the both of you, in any sequence. Both of you deal with sensitive topics. Singapore is not known for free expression, and you work in a relatively conservative environment. In India, actors taking on sensitive topics face boycott calls, legal cases, and even attacks on cinema theaters. When both of you select projects, are you aware of the boundaries and how do you stretch or even break them? Have you experienced online trolling due to your work, and how do you handle it? Anyone, please. One after the other.
You know, when on the eve of my book getting out, I had an anxiety attack. And I called Himali, my agent, and I said, what have I done? Like, I have to be the stupidest, most dumbest human being ever. Here I give an interview and I get misquoted all the time. It's part of what I do. It's like occupational hazard. And here I have written a book where I have poured my thoughts onto a piece of paper for perpetuity. Like, that's just dumb. And the choice is a fantasy fiction novel with a female Muslim superhero with a hijab as a cape, which can be misconstrued in so many different ways. And my next interview for a film could turn out to be this political, I don't know, meltdown situation. And what have I done? But I think, I don't know, I think I would have not been honest to myself if I had not written that book and put it out there. I felt like it was something that I had to do, and I think people have been really kind. I think it's been appreciated in the right way. I've been invited to every possible literature festival to talk about it, whether it's Jaipur or Abu Dhabi or here, beautiful Bhutan. And I feel like sometimes we have to make brave choices to express ourselves authentically. Because if you don't do that, actually, out of fear or criticism or backlash or trolling, the only person you're doing a disservice to is you yourself. Because I felt something inside me would have not, would have died. And does trolling hurt? Yeah, it sucks. It's awful. But I think trolling is also so much more about the person trolling you than about you. It's about their deep unhappiness and resentment with the life they're leading. And that's the only way I can look at it. So sometimes when someone's trolling me, I'm like, sir, are you okay? Are you having a good day or not? And I feel like, that's the only way I can deal with it.
So as a poet, I am very used to speaking truth within constraints. And to your comment on, this is the first time you've heard a Singaporean talk about dissent, actually the phrase that I said about dissent coming from a place of love is something that I said in a conference which was attended by many Singapore ministers. So I said so very unapologetically. And I really do think it is about speaking with respect and with and understanding the context that you're speaking to. And I actually do work as a lawyer for the Singapore government. So I also am very, very aware of what the boundaries are, legally speaking. And I'm very clear about staying within those boundaries. So I think, you do have to educate yourself on the right boundaries. But I have to say that an interesting fact about Singapore is that poetry is actually our most popular literary form. So we routinely sell, thousands of poetry books. So our Singapore poets actually sell far more books than our Singapore novelists. And the reason, and it's so rare in any other society. And I really do believe that the reason behind that is because there are certain things that you can say encoded in poetry that would attract a very different scrutiny when you say plainly in prose. And the other point that I do want to make in this respect is also that, the question was on boundaries, right? Sensitive topics, yes. Okay, I remember what else I wanted to say, which was that, yes, because I am quite outspoken on feminist issues, I have actually been called a dominating woman. And I was kind of bristled at it at first, and then I was like, oh my gosh, that's a brilliant title. That I'm going to use that for my trilogy of plays, Psycho Bitches 1, #Women Supporting Women, and my third play, which is yet to come out, but it will be centered around women's issues. And the reason why dominating women, I thought, was a fantastic title for my plays is because it has two meanings. On one hand, it's the idea of a dominating / intimidating woman, but on the other hand, it is about women being dominated, right? And a lot of my characters, they are very strong female characters who are still suffering under the oppression of the patriarchy. So thanks to the troll who called me a dominating woman, I now have the title for my next work.
Thank you very much. Amanda and Huma, there is growing fatigue with words like breaking the glass ceiling, women empowerment, etc. Because while things have changed, so much has also not changed for women, especially in our Asian cultures and settings. So how do you ensure that your works on gender do not fall into the traps of meaningless slogans and tokenism? Again, in any sequence.
It's tough. It's tough, and it requires you to constantly also reevaluate your own ideas about things and choices, and it's a process. I don't think we've arrived there yet, but I don't think anyone can ever arrive. I think, and that's the beautiful thing about relationships, which are about and conversations about feminism or toxic masculinity or whatever it is. I think we are constantly. And also today, with how technology is interacting with human behavior, we're constantly sort of reevaluating how we are dealing with all of these things. For me, like I said, through my work, I'm constantly looking at people and then trying to be like, okay, how best can I absorb this person's experience and try and put this in my work? So when I'm playing a village woman in Maharani, who's never been to a school and is chief minister now of a state, I try and portray that as authentically as possible. So, because I feel like when that show gets the love it gets and it gets spoken about globally, I'm representing the reality of that woman from that rural belt in India who has never been represented like that. We have an idea that that Indian woman is supposed to be dumb, has no agency, is suppressed. But no, actually, there are many such women like that who are actually agents of change. But those stories are not glamorous enough to be portrayed. And I really enjoy that. Or I'm playing Tarla Dalal, who's India's first master chef. Who was a feminist even before people knew what the word feminism was. Or to play like a devilishly sexy character called Monica, oh my darling, that I remember doing an interview, and there was a female interview, and she asked me, so tell me, this character you playing a vamp? And I said, excuse me, why did you choose to use that word for me, vamp? Because this is a black comedy where everyone's trying to con each other, but you've not called the male actor a villain. So how do I become the vamp? So these are ideas that constantly through our work and through the showcasing of our work, we need to constantly keep challenging. It's a process.
Thanks so much, Huma. We were talking a little bit about this outside. I really appreciate the work of intelligent actors like yourself who put in the research to break down the characters to ensure that they're not just playing caricatures, but really reflecting the full humanity of characters. And to your point, Tenzing, about the social media slogans, and things like #LeanIn, #GirlBoss, #Women Supporting Women. All of these slogans, I don't want to completely say that they are lacking in value entirely, because I do think that they help women come together. And the most potent example of that would be Me Too, which became a platform for women to tell their individual stories of sexual assault. And I do think that's where the distinction comes in, where you need that storytelling, you need that complexity of reflecting individual stories, because hashtags blunt the binaries and the complexities behind our individual experience. And I would like to think that art, especially when sensitively practiced, by actors like Huma, they really help to expand that understanding of different social issues. And we need art to offer perspectives of the gray, the ambivalence in our society, so that we can navigate and better move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very interesting session. I guess we're out of time. Oh, okay. Vigorous signboards going on there.
We're leaving. Don't throw us out.
Yeah. So we know two very interesting ladies here on stage, and not enough time, but I think everything good must come to an end. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And thank you for all your lovely questions.
you.
You were wonderful.